The attack is over. The fires have been put out. The smoke has cleared over Battleship Row. The harbor looks like a graveyard, and in many ways it is. But the sailors guarding the wreckage of the USS West Virginia can't sleep, not because of nightmares, because of the sound. Coming from beneath tons of steel and seawater, rhythmic, deliberate, unmistakably human, are knocks. 3 men are still alive at the bottom of this ship. The guards know exactly where they are, and they can't do a single thing to save them. To understand what happened to those 3 men, you need to understand what happened to their ship. December 7th, 1941, 7:55 in the morning, a clear, beautiful Hawaiian Sunday. Then 353 Japanese aircraft fill the sky, and in the next 2 hours, the United States Navy ceases to exist as a Pacific fighting force. The USS West Virginia, known to her crew simply as the Wee-Vee, was moored outboard of the USS Tennessee at Ford Island. She was one of the most powerful battleships in the American fleet, 30,000 tons of steel, over 1,500 men aboard. She never stood a chance. In the first 10 minutes of the attack, the West Virginia is hit by at least 7 aerial torpedoes, possibly more. Then 2 armor-piercing bombs tear through her upper decks. She begins to list so severely to port that she would have capsized entirely, rolled over and crushed everyone inside, if her crew hadn't flooded the starboard compartments to counterbalance the weight. That decision saved the ship from rolling, but it also sealed her fate. The West Virginia sank on an even keel, settling on the bottom of Pearl Harbor in about 40 feet of water, her superstructure still visible above the surface, her hull completely submerged. Here's what almost no one talks about. When a ship of this size sinks in a controlled, upright position, physics creates something unexpected. In certain watertight compartments, rooms sealed by airtight doors, the water pressure from outside can actually trap pockets of breathable air inside. The ship becomes a pressure cooker. The water can't get in, the air can't get out. Compartment A-111, deep in the forward hull of the West Virginia, was one of those pockets. And inside Compartment A-111, when the shooting stopped and the harbor went quiet, 3 young men were still breathing. Ronald Endicott, age 18, Clifford Olds, age 20, Louis Costin, age 21. Sailors, boys really, trapped at the bottom of Pearl Harbor. Within days, the Navy knew people were alive inside the West Virginia. The knocking was impossible to miss. Organized, rhythmic, SOS patterns in Morse code, scratched out in steel by desperate hands. So why didn't they just cut them out? The West Virginia was not just full of trapped air. She was full of aviation fuel, oil, and ammunition. A cutting torch near the hull would create a spark. One spark in the wrong place, and the entire ship would become a bomb, killing the rescuers, the trapped men, and anyone else within 100 yards. Even drilling a small hole risked igniting the fuel that coated everything inside. The Navy engineers ran the numbers. Every rescue scenario ended the same way. But there was another problem, perhaps even more brutal. To cut through the hull, you needed to know exactly where the men were. You needed to cut into a dry space, not into a flooded compartment. One wrong cut, and the air pocket collapses. The compartment floods in seconds. Even if the engineers could solve the fuel problem, they couldn't guarantee the precision of the cut. Not quickly, not safely. They needed to pump out the water first, salvage the ship, and that was going to take months. The men assigned to guard the wreck started requesting reassignments. They weren't afraid of the dark or the cold water. They were afraid of the knocking. One sailor described it later in a letter home. He said you'd be walking your post, and suddenly, through the hull, just this sound, like someone drumming, patient, methodical, almost like they knew you were there. Some guards reportedly sat down on the dock and wept. Others refused to complete their shifts. The Navy ultimately began rotating guard duty more frequently to prevent psychological breakdown. Because here's the thing that makes this truly unbearable. The men inside could probably hear the guards walking above them, could likely hear the rescue boats, could hear the engines. They knew people were there. They had to believe help was coming. They kept knocking.
Close your eyes for a second. I want you to feel this. Imagine a steel room roughly the size of a walk-in closet. No windows, no natural light. The air smells of salt water, fuel, and fear. The water level is chest high and has been since the first day. It is completely, totally dark. Ronald, Clifford, and Louis were lucky in one terrible sense. Compartment A-111 contained emergency rations. Navy ships of the era kept survival supplies in sealed lockers throughout the hull, specifically for situations like flooding, where a crew might need to wait out a disaster. There was food, hard biscuits, canned goods, enough to sustain 3 men for weeks if rationed carefully. There was also water, though not clean water, brackish, partially contaminated by seawater, enough to survive on, barely. Day 1, they were in shock. The attack had been so fast, so overwhelming. They'd survived the initial sinking by pure chance, sealed in the right room at the right moment. Day 2, the sounds from outside gave them hope. Boat engines, voices muffled through steel and water. They knocked harder. They knew someone had to hear them. Day 3, still knocking, taking turns to conserve energy. The physical conditions were extraordinary. The temperature in the compartment was stable. The ocean water around them acted as insulation, but the humidity was total. Everything was wet. Their clothes never dried. The darkness was absolute. When the flashlight batteries died, and they did, they sat in complete blackness, counting the knocks, counting the days. Psychologists who study isolation say the hardest part isn't the physical deprivation, it's the uncertainty, not knowing if anyone is coming. Now imagine you can hear them up there. Boat engines, footsteps on the hull above your head, and the sounds keep moving away. There's something else that no one talks about enough: oxygen. 3 men breathing in a sealed space. Carbon dioxide builds up. The air grows stale. By week 2, breathing would have become noticeably harder. They might have experienced headaches, confusion, fatigue that felt like weights on their chests. Thinking clearly would have become a battle in itself. And yet, they kept the calendar. Someone found it. Someone marked it every single day. December 7th, December 8th, December 9th. Each X was an act of will, a refusal to give up, a defiant, silent declaration: we are still here. We are still counting. Someone will come. We don't know exactly what they talked about, what they thought about, whether they prayed. We know only what the calendar tells us. They survived to day 16. On the morning of December 23, 1941, 16 days after the attack, the knocking stopped. The guards noticed immediately. Some of them had come to dread it, but when it stopped, something worse settled in. Silence. The salvage operation on the USS West Virginia was one of the most complex in American naval history. Workers spent months pumping water from the hull, patching torpedo holes, slowly raising the great ship section by section. The West Virginia was eventually refloated in May of 1942, nearly 5 months after the attack. When the salvage crews finally reached Compartment A-111, they found what they had feared: 3 sets of human remains, and on the wall, a calendar. December 7th, X. December 8th, X. December 9th through 22nd, X. December 23rd, nothing. The calendar told a story that no report could capture. Those 16 X's were 16 sunrises those men would never see. 16 nights they kept faith that someone was coming. The last X on December 22nd means someone was alive enough to reach the calendar, alert enough to care about marking the day. And then December 23rd arrived, and they couldn't. The families of Ronald Endicott, Clifford Olds, and Louis Costin were told what every Pearl Harbor family was told in those terrible days: missing, presumed dead. They were not told about the compartment, not told about the knocking, not told about the calendar. The full story was classified for years. Some family members didn't learn the truth until decades later, that their sons, their brothers, their boys had survived the attack, had lived through 16 more days, had kept hoping. Imagine receiving that phone call 40 years later, learning that your son wasn't killed in the attack. He survived it, and then he waited and waited, and nobody could reach him in time.
The USS West Virginia was repaired after the war, and she returned to fight. She was present at the Battle of Surigao Strait in 1944, part of the last battleship versus battleship engagement in history. She was also present at the formal Japanese surrender in Tokyo Bay on September 2, 1945, fitting, perhaps, that a ship that suffered so much at the beginning was there to witness the end. Ronald Endicott, Clifford Olds, Louis Costin, their names are on the Pearl Harbor Memorial. They are counted among the 2,403 Americans who died that day, even though they technically survived it by more than 2 weeks. They are honored as heroes, and they are.
But when I think about them, what strikes me isn't the heroism, it's the faith. Those men kept marking their calendar because they believed someone was coming. In 16 days of darkness, of brackish water, of thinning air, of knocking against steel, they never stopped believing. They had no way to know the technical impossibility of their rescue. They just knew there are people out there, American sailors. They will find a way. That faith, stubborn, irrational, beautiful, is recorded in red ink on a paper calendar that now sits in a historical archive. 16 X's, 16 days of refusing to give up. The next time someone tells you that hope is pointless, that it changes nothing, remember that calendar. Remember that 16 times in total darkness, someone reached up and made a mark. Proof that they were there. Proof that they had not given in, even if no one ever found it, even if no one ever knew. If this story moved you, if it made you stop and think, I want to ask you something. What would you have done in those 16 days? Would you have kept knocking? Would you have kept marking the calendar? Or would you have stopped? Leave your answer in the comments below. Leave a tribute to Ronald, Clifford, and Louis. Let's make sure these men are not forgotten. And if you want more stories of real men in impossible situations, men who faced the worst moments of the Second World War and refused to break, subscribe, because there are more, many more. This has been the horror of the USS West Virginia and the men who refused to stop knocking.